What's up, Simonics, and welcome back to a new quick win. Today we're talking about a little animation that I also included in one of the big build with Ionic tutorials, and that how to build an automatic sticky dynamic segment component with Ionic. What we want to do is basically, if you have a list of multiple categories, that you got an additional segment at the top where you can quickly jump to a specific category inside your Ion content, and at the same time we also want to mark the active category while the user is scrolling through our view. So those are two things that we want to do. Before we do that, we have to do some RxJS transformation, a little exercise, I would call it. You can skip it if your data is already ordered like it is, otherwise it's a nice little refresher, I think. Full tutorial link below the video for all Ionic Academy members, and if you're not yet a member of the Ionic Academy, go check it out, ionicacademy.com, my place to help you with everything Ionic. So let's dive into our component and quick win of the day. Alright, the first step today is to create a blank new Ionic application, and I already did this and quite a few changes. So let's go through them quickly so we can go to the real important part of this tutorial. I added the HTTP client module because I'm making a few HTTP calls. There's a very simple reason for this. I needed some dummy data, and I already got this example API that I created for a course inside the Ionic Academy, which contains one endpoint to retrieve some categories and one endpoint to retrieve some products. And I wanted to combine these, so in the end we got an output like this, where you got an array with the different categories, and each category has an array of products. That's the whole idea for this tutorial. Maybe your API is already returning some kind of array where all the products or the items are in their categories, and then you can basically skip this part. Otherwise, it's a nice little example of using RxJS. So let's take a look at my homepage. I'm starting with an HTTP call to get the categories. Quite easy. Remember, categories, just an array of the categories. I then save those categories, and I perform a little transformation for the detail image, since the detail image of a category looks like this, so a relative URL, and I wanted to add Academy Coffee Shop API in front of that URL. That's the whole reason for this first tab block. I might have called this map as well, but I'm not really changing the output of the category, so I use tab instead. So just doing a little transformation. Then we're done with the categories, and we need to switch to the products observable, so we use switch map, and then we actually transform the products. We do first of all the same like we did with the detail image, just to change that image as well. And then the interesting part is really this last map block. Now, if you have an array like this, you need to go through the items, and for each item I need to check the category. I've then created this little map, so if inside the map the category doesn't exist yet, so if it's not yet there, I will just create a new entry inside the product map with only the product in it, and otherwise I will simply push the product to a category, which means you get like a map with, you get category 1, whatever items in here, then you get category 2, and you have already ordered by category the items. Now, this is not the final output that we want, so I also iterated all the items of our product map once again, using for each. And then I basically wanted to create this entry is the object you see right here. So the entry is basically the whole information from the category plus this product array. And we can see this, we're using all the information from one category, and for the product, we're using the value of our map, which is this array. Really, it's just a little transformation, not many lines, but this can be really helpful. And I also use this little get category So the values of the product map, this is actually the category ID, and this is the value. And to get the real information for a category, I created this little helper function which filters our categories by ID and returns that information, just to make this a bit easier. I could actually have done basically the same right in that spot. It's not really a huge help, I just noticed. Anyway, in the end, then you get the ordered products, and that's what we assign to our products. That was everything I wanted to show you up front, and now we can dive into our app, because we now get that information. Let's start with a fake segment. So the fake segment will actually be an Ion Slides component. And we're gonna use some custom options in a second. Well, let's just set the options to 0 or to an empty object, and we'll be fine. And then we got Ion Slide basically for every category that we got. So let cat of categories, and then let's use an Ion button within our slides. We're gonna use a clear fill and use the category.name. So that's the first part, and that should already display the segments. Yeah, it looks like this. Of course, that's not the real outcome that we were after, and that's the reason why we're using custom options. So we're gonna disable that one again, and we're gonna set the mode to free. You can find all of these settings in the Dangerous Swiper API settings, so it's not really listed inside the Ionic documentation. All these options, slides per view, 2.8 makes us see multiple buttons in that view and a little bit of offset before and after. Gives us a result that looks more like this. So as you can see, it's free mode, it's not snapping at any place. I can just freely go through this, and we got all of our buttons. Now that's the first part. Now the interesting part is displaying our different products and categories. So for each category, basically for each object in our array, we're gonna create one Ion list. That means ng4 let entry of products. That's basically the overview product, and at some point we're gonna have maybe let's just use an Ion row, because then we can easily style this. ng4 let product of entry.products. Okay, so what am I doing wrong? Okay, I used let twice. All right, that's how it in general looks like. And now we can add some more information to this setup. So for every Ion list, I'm gonna add an Ion list header, simply because, well, because I don't wanna have an Ion item at the top, but I wanna have this little list header. And I used a little trick here. So for the list header, I tried to set the background image using URL entry image. And you see something else in here. I will remove it for a second so you see the difference and the reason why I did this. As well, I added a little label with a title and subtitle, so we can get this nice little header. Now that looks already great. Well, not really. We notice multiple problems. We don't really have the real size. I don't like that size. It's just using the size of the labels. So we're gonna set some custom height for that. And as well, if you got white text on an image, it can be a problem because, well, the image could be light as well. And that was the whole reason to adding this little gradient, because whenever you use a gradient like that, you can simply make sure that your text can be read. It doesn't matter what the background is. I don't know where I got these values from. I just used something and then played a bit around with the values. So using the gradient in here makes a lot of sense if you want to create a background image and text above it to make sure that you can really always read it. Now for the Ion list header, we're now also going to set a bit of padding setting the background position already. Color white, actually it's already white, which gives us some nice headers for our categories. Okay, for the Ion slides, well, let's keep it like they are for now. And let's continue with, why did I actually set the text color to white? That really completely unnecessary, right? Let's see. Yeah, it's really completely unnecessary. Okay, we can continue with our ion row, which is basically the product setup. I'm gonna bring this in as well. We're not here for a design course, so the first part of the column will simply have the product name, the product description, and the price. And at the end, we're gonna have a little thumbnail, once again using background image. That makes it easy to style all of them the same way. Because if you just display an image from API, I always encounter problems that the images have different sizes, and it always looks bad. And if you use it as a background image and set a specific width in my case is using the full width available, then you can make sure that the image is really always the same. Well, okay, it's not always the same because our rows have a different height, but you could also change that easily. Also, I really want to have a bit more padding, and I think I added this border bottom class. Let's see. Okay, that looks a tiny bit better already. I feel like something's missing in my setup, but I can't tell you what exactly is missing. At some point there should be padding, but I think the ion row really needs class ion padding. That should make everything better. Yeah, a lot better. Now we got a bit of padding, and we can go through the categories. We see one category, next, and next. Okay, that's a good starting point. We can throw through them. We can't really use them. Also, what we notice is we wanted to keep them sticky at the top, and they're not really sticky. Now, there are two ways to make your item sticky. One, there's actually a fixed slot. You could do something like this. There's a fixed slot inside the ion content that you can use to fix some items. The problem is, as you can see, somehow using the fixed slot, it messes up a lot of things. The background color is gone, and the sizing isn't correct anymore. For some reason, smoothies here is a bit out of view. So in this case, instead of using the slot fixed, what we can do as well is simply use a sticky position for our ion slides. Oh, thanks for this, Simon. Well, we make the position sticky to the top, a bit of padding inside and the background color. And as a result, we see our ion slides above the content, as we can see right here. They're not covering anything, so we don't need any additional padding. Sliding through them still works exactly like we want it, and they are sticky while we are scrolling down. So in this case, I really preferred this solution. I have used the fixed slot in the past, but it wasn't working always that great. Okay, we're now at the position, well, you got your list, you got your slides, and we can finally add this automation behavior. So therefore, let's start with the button perhaps. For the button, we're gonna use a conditional class, and therefore we're gonna need the index of our iteration as well. So we're gonna mark the button with the active category once the active category is equal to the index of our iteration. For now, we're gonna set the active category to 0. Category slides visible. I'm really not sure why we should need that value. Simon, please do it better next time. And we're gonna also finally attach a click event. So on click, we wanna select a specific category in our view. We will see how to do that in a second. Basically, what we want to do at that point is scroll to a specific ion list. That means we need to access them as view children. Before we do that, let's quickly add our active category CSS, because then we are finished with the CSS. We're just gonna change the background color, border radius, font weight. No, I don't wanna search my Mac, and I definitely wanna turn off the sound. Anyway, okay, so we can't use any other, but we can see that right now the first one is selected. So we're going to make sure that we can select the others as well. And to do so, we need a way to access our ion list. We're going to start with a simple query for our view children. So let's add all missing imports. That means what does this actually do? Well, it will access all the ion lists inside our view. We could also have used for the ion list a template reference, but we will simply retrieve all ion lists. We are interested in the actual native elements, so we're going to put in read element ref so we don't get the ion list element wrapper. And as a result, we're going to have a query list. Now, the problem, actually there are two problems. First of all, for a query list, you usually need to call something like this.lists to array to actually get the items from that query list. Now, the problem is usually you would do this inside the after view init. But we're actually making an HTTP call and transforming the data. So at this point, the data might, with a very high possibility, be not yet ready, which means we don't have any view children. If you want to access view children and you're creating them based on some JSON data that you fetch from an API or anything that's an asynchronous operation, you're gonna have to wait. You're gonna have to wait until the data is actually there. And you can do this by using changes and subscribing to the changes here. We don't really need the result from the changes. The only thing we need at this point is to create an empty array. And once the list finally changes, we're gonna set our list elements to this.lists to array. And let's put a lock in here for our list elements, and then we're gonna see that after the data is ready, we will get 5 element references. Somewhere this exactly. It highlighted already the first list. I could now scroll to the bottom and find the second item. Yeah, which, well, I don't know, I'm confused. That's actually not the ion list that should be highlighted. Maybe this is wrong. Well, we got our 5 list elements. And with those list elements in place, once we now select a category, we can scroll exactly to one item. So let's get the right child by saying list elements at the position index dot native element. That's exactly the child we want to get when we click on one of our buttons, list 0, list 1, list 2, and so on. And now we can scroll our ion content to that position. And once again, we're going to access the ion content as a view child. Oh no, I should have used add all missing imports. And we can use this.content and say, please scroll to, you can use actually a lot of events, a lot of functions, scroll to point, scroll to whatever, and we're going to use scroll to point. Our number for the X position is 0 because we don't really want to scroll horizontal. We're going to scroll to the child offset top, so the position from top. And we're going to change this maybe a bit, and we're going to use a little duration of 1 second so we can really see what's going on. And let's give this a try. We're going to go to espresso, and we see that we're scrolling maybe a bit too far because the header has actually a height of 100 and a bit of padding. So I'm just going to manually change this by 100. Maybe 50 would be enough. I don't know. That's just a rough estimation, but this will now scroll your category perfectly fine into your view. We're still not changing the active category here. We will do this now in the second step, but for now, that's already pretty good. All right, the second step is to listen to scroll events to automatically update the segments and also to update them after this select category function runs through. So we're going to add a function on scroll. which will be called, guess when? Maybe it will be called onScroll. And to call that function onScroll, we can use it IonScroll. Whenever we scroll, we want to call our function with the current event. Now, this wouldn't be called right now because we still need to tell Ionic to output scroll events. They are disabled by default for performance reasons, but if you say scroll events true, everything will be fine. Now we will get a lot of events in here. I will put this log in, and then we should see that it's basically logging all the time, all the events. And from that event, we can get a bit of information, but we really don't, I think we don't actually need that information. The only thing we need to do at that point is come up with a logic that once we scroll, we check if a specific view children of our array is inside the view. So right now, the first list is inside the view. At some point, the second list is inside the view. That switch is a bit complicated and isn't working, I wouldn't say, isn't working perfectly. You can also define this. Maybe you want to already activate the next category when this actually becomes visible inside the view. Maybe you want to have it like in the center. Maybe you want to have it when the category reaches the top. Really, that's up to you. So we're going to implement just one way to do it. And one way to do it would be to go through our items. So this dot list elements length ++. I also tried to iterate list from behind, which gives a little bit different behavior. Really, once again, it's completely up to you. Then we can grab our item from the list and we can somehow check if the item is within the visible view. And for that, I came up with a little additional function, is element in viewport. There are actually JavaScript solutions which are a lot bigger than this. I just had a little calculation in here. Let me log the rectangle. I'll put it here, and I'm going to put a log for the index here so we know what's going on. So if this dot is element in viewport item, we're going to say log is visible. Let's give this a try so we can play a bit around with the numbers. Okay, let me scroll just one time, and we get from our first list the rect. And we already see it's visible. We're actually still going through all the others. Maybe we can directly change this by adding a break, because once we found an item that is visible, we don't really need to continue our iteration and can save a bit of performance. So we're scrolling and item 0 is already marked as visible. The reason is top is 100 and the height is whatever. So top plus height is definitely bigger than 0. Now, once we scroll quite close to the next item, let's see. At this point, we see top is already minus whatever, and I just wanted to calculate that when top and height basically equal 0, we're gonna change and use the next category. In our case, I also added minus 100 because I want to do it a bit earlier. Maybe we could also do minus 200. So let's try and see at which point. At some point, really, now we can see it. Now the first isn't visible all the time. It takes 2, so it goes even to the next element. This first element has a height and top. This is below 0, so we're going to use the second element as active. Once again, the calculation isn't perfect. Maybe you want to come up with something else, but basically that's how you can do it. Just play around a bit with the numbers. Now, if something is active, we're going to set our active category to the current. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted. We're going to set the active category, and what this will do is it will already change our category up there. I could maybe add or get rid of the log statements. That works pretty fine. The problem is we can even do better. We're gonna remove the logs, and on top of that, we're gonna manually slide our Ion slides. Once again, I'm adding a view child. to access our ion slides. If you have multiple ion slides, you might want to put a template reference on your ion slide, and I'm going to put this up because it feels better to have them up here. And then when we found the item that should be marked active, we can use this dot slides slide to the current index, and then we will get another nice animation on top. So when I now go through this, we scroll to espresso, and when I reach the next category, it scrolls there and it scrolls there. The only problem is right now that for the smoothies category, I only got 2. And we can't scroll them into view. That's a kind of logical problem. If you define the switch reason here to be the item is at the top, well, then it's hard to access this. The only way to fix this would be to add something like dash padding bottom of whatever 500. Is it padding bottom or is it? Yeah, should be. Yeah. So now you see, maybe if you have some items below, it would work. But right now with our criteria, it wouldn't become active usually. Still, if we now scroll somewhere, it should usually work. Maybe our -100 is a bit big at our scroll to or at here. I actually don't know if we still need this. Let's see if we can make this work again. Why are you scrolling that far? It didn't look like that when I gave it a try before. Well, anyway, it's a bit playing around with the numbers to come up with a perfect solution. And the logic to when you want to activate a certain category. You could, of course, simply say, whenever the category comes into view, I'm already going to make this. That's really up to you. And I feel like I'm working with the numbers. I really destroyed everything right now. Can we please just, yeah, at least this works again. Okay, but overall, we can now listen to the scroll events output from the Ion content and check if certain elements are visible. And we got the manual function to select something. And everything is kind of based on accessing our list elements as view children. That's really the important part. If you want to scroll to something inside your view or check if something is visible, always try to access them as a view child. It will make doing something like this in the end kind of easy. So once you got the setup right, everything else is just a bit playing around with the numbers and making it work. But accessing those elements is really the important part, and that is the end of our tutorial. All right, and that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed today's quick win. It was an example of a very specific component, and if you want to see more like this, more on, well, implementing certain behavior that might look a bit difficult from the outside, just let me know in the comments. And of course, go check out the Ionic Academy, my place to help you with everything Ionic. Of course, also don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you get notified about the upcoming videos about either Ionic, Angular, or anything that I'm covering here, and give the video a like while you're here. Hope you enjoyed this. Have a great week, happy coding, and catch you next time. Simon.